So thank you for joining us. Now, I want to set the stage for what we're going to talk about and a piece of what was done, I think is really valuable is the education side. So these might seem like very basic questions, but I think will provide a very so I'll start introducing our two lovely leaders. We've got Nick Serrano, who's the vice chair of the San Diego County Water Board. And he also is the deputy chief of staff for San Diego Mayor Corporation.
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing much.
Just a big major civic event. I'm glad to see all these people here. I mean, not over at the SB 10 thing. Eat your heart out, Scott Lewis.
And of course, to my right, Jack Keating, he's the general manager of Fallbrook Public Utilities District.
Yeah. And Nick never thought he'd be at a water nerds panel, so that's a prize he got on being on the Water Authority Board, I guess.
Other duties as assigned. I actually think I stole that from the mayor, so I know he's going to hear this later, so I just want to make sure that I don't get yelled at later.
So let's just start. Quick foundation. If one of you wants to explain what the heck is the San Diego County Water Authority?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you the primer about the San Diego County Water Authority. So San Diego County Water Authority was formed in about 1944 under the County Water Authority Act. We are essentially a wholesale water supplier. So we purchase and import the water that we need for the region. And then we have member agencies who serve on a board of directors. So it's a 38-member board, 20+ member agencies. And so the Water Authority purchases, imports the water, and provides it to the member agencies, which are some are water districts that are like Fallbrook. Some of them are cities like the city of San Diego. And then the water ends up getting purchased by the member agencies like the city of San Diego and then ultimately provided to the customer. So I think that's a high level, right? You want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick got it perfectly. The only thing I think to add is to make it even more confusing for everyone is the Water Authority then buys a lot of its water from Metropolitan, who is the one who is getting water from the Colorado River and State Water Project water. So as a retail agency, when you get your bill, most of your money isn't going to that retail agency, right? That retail agency is having to pay the wholesale agency, and in our case, the Water Authority, who's having to pay Metropolitan. So that's part of why cost of water is expensive in Southern California. There's a lot of infrastructure between you and your water. There's a lot of public agencies between you and your water.
Thank you. So how many ratepayers do you represent?
So Fallbrook Public Utility District. So how many people have been to Fallbrook? And when I say been to Fallbrook, I mean, you got to go the 10 minutes off I-15, not through the freeway, but the 10 minutes off I-15 to downtown Fallbrook. Right. Nick was there recently.
You invited me.
I invited him. Yeah. So we serve what's really sort of downtown Fallbrook in an area most people probably don't know exists in San Diego County, which is Duluth. So Duluth is up behind Camp Pendleton, kind of Orange County, Camp Pendleton. People that live in Duluth are 35 minutes away from downtown Fallbrook. So we're about 28,000 acres, but only 35,000 people. So big service area, fairly limited number of people. Fallbrook, hasn't changed. It hasn't grown that much. So it was a relatively larger, community in San Diego County. Our district was actually formed in 1920, and it really grew up around avocado. So that's what built Fallbrook. That region was avocado development. Really was the hub in the Fallbrook area.
What about you, Nick?
Well, the city of San Diego serves 1.4 million people. So we I would say that one of the things that's interesting, that's kind of a fun fact about the city of San Diego and its relationship with the Water Authority, the water that we purchase from the authority is outside of our personnel at the city of San Diego, the largest expenditure that we have. So in 2022, we spent about $350 million purchasing water from the Water Authority to get it to the residents of the city of San Diego. And so by extension, we're the largest customer of the San Diego County Water Authority.
What does it mean to be the largest customer?
Well, as the largest customer, we do have a proportional vote share on the Water Authority board in terms of its governance. So the city's representation on the board, we have 10 representatives of the city. That's about 38% of the vote at the Water Authority. And that is by the fact that we do purchase the most from the Water Authority and are its largest customer.
Can you guys hear me okay? Someone tell me my mic is a little lower. Okay, you yell at me if you can't hear me. I'll yell at you back. So let's set up, where are we now? The city of San Diego approved, San Diego City Council approved in about 20% raise increase. That's over the next 2 years. What's up with that?
Well, it's a couple of things. I mean, so there is, a cost of service study that the city of San Diego has to do, which basically is an analysis of the needs that we're going to have to provide water to our residents, matched with the infrastructure that we're going to need to get that work done, to get the water to people's households. So we're required by law to look at that over every number of years, and that produces what type of revenue we're going to need to bring in order to provide the service to our households. So what you saw was the city of San Diego for many years had not done that. And so we just did it this year. And so part of it is an increase to be able to continue to provide residents with the water to maintain the infrastructure that's necessary to get that water to your household. And then added in on that is a pass-through charge that comes from the San Diego County Water Authority. So basically, when the Water Authority increases rates, that trickles down to the member agencies, and the member agencies have to decide at that point what they do with that. Member agencies generally aren't in a position just to eat it themselves. They need to then pass that through to the customer. And so that's why anytime that you watch a board meeting at the authority and we talk about water rates, at least the time that I've been there, it's a very long discussion, and it can get a little bit charged at times because we are talking about, asking, the public to pay more. And since the time that I've been on the authority, I've really tried to center this conversation about affordability. I'll tell you that I got on the board in 2021, and I think one of the first votes I took was on the budget, and contemplated in that was rate increases. And it seemed just kind of a benign conversation to my colleagues at the time, where it was just kind of not something that there's a lot of comment on, just kind of like, oh, hey, we're just going to rubber stamp this. And I remember looking at one of my new colleagues, Ismahan Abdullahi, who represents the city of San Diego. And we got on the authority with that same purpose of looking at affordability. And it was very interesting that we both looked at each other and was like, is anybody going to say anything on this? Because I think this is an issue. And so we've really tried to center this conversation about affordability, because we know that what comes from the Water Authority ends up as rate increases to the residents, in my case of the city of San Diego, in Jack's case, the residents of Fallbrook.
You mentioned earlier, Nick, that part of those increases that we saw, the city council approved, included something that the city had not done in a while. Why is that?
Well, I think you'd have to ask past leadership. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we're currently doing at the city of San Diego is trying to correct a lot of bad things that happened, or clear the decks of issues that have long gone unresolved. And I think the truth of the matter is that water rate increases aren't politically popular. I mean, no one wants to increase people's water rates, right? I mean, and so I think people didn't do this study because of the fact they didn't want to know whether they needed to increase people's water rates in order to provide the service that is necessary over the next number of years. And so you end up in this space where not doing that work, you're not bringing in the revenue that's necessary to keep up with today's times, to keep up with inflationary costs. And so under this mayor, he wasn't interested in deferring that conversation. He wanted to know what's going to be necessary. And you all hear about it all the time, or you may see it in your own neighborhood. I mean, case in point, all the water main breaks that happen in the city of San Diego, right? That is not keeping up with the infrastructure that's necessary. And so we have to do that work. And so unfortunately, this study produced the increase that's necessary. And so we asked the city council to approve it, and we're grateful that they did.
Yeah, and I think people need to be aware the trajectory we've put ourselves in the region. There's going to be very significant water rate increases, and there have been. In some cases, we've been so focused on the supply side of, in supply commitments are insurance. And so there needs to be a discussion, do we have enough insurance? Do we have too much insurance? What does that insurance cost? And so that cost, the way we've set it up right now with this level of insurance, declining demands, reduced population growth, pretty stable population growth, has a big impact on cost of water. On top of that, when you really look at it, everyone's been so worried about just passing through this cost, which the wholesale cost of the water authority has gone up significantly. They really have underinvested in their own infrastructure. And so in a lot of ways, there's a tendency to be solving the problem that was there in the past and not the one that's coming. And infrastructure and breaks, our district, has a lot of breaks like the city of San Diego. We were built over 100 years ago, largely built by farmers that weren't saying, hey, I want to make sure this lasts 100 years. Those pressures really put a lot of pressure on water rates and create real affordability challenges. Our community has a large disadvantaged community, which you may not recognize unless you've been to downtown Fallbrook to really recognize what Fallbrook is. It's not, a high-end area. And that combination of water supply costs, infrastructure needs is really creating some challenges.
Jeff, could you speak to the cost of water in Fallbrook? I mean, I think when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that your ratepayers pay high rates.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. So if you look, the cost of water in the county, so one depends how much local water you have. So it's a very complicated question. So if you have low cost local water, and the region in San Diego has been sort of fortunate that, Sweetwater Authority that serves a lot of the lower income areas has low cost groundwater. So they've shielded themselves to some extent from the cost of water that's affected the rest of us. But if you're 100% reliant on wholesale water, that tends to be the most expensive supply. So you'll see the districts. So local water. So like Nick said, yeah, I got to get a little nerdy, but I'm going to try to keep it less nerdy. So there's a San Diego County Water Authority, which is a membership of 24 member agencies. Those member agencies are separate and distinct entities. And based on when they were formed and where they exist, they might have groundwater. They might have rights to, say, Lake Hodges. They might have rights to that water because they were formed near, but it's just geography. And so Fallbrook Public Utility District, for example, we don't overlie a groundwater basin. So we didn't have local water. We do now, but that's its whole other long story. It's with Camp Pendleton. I'm not going to get into it. So some people have local water supplies. Some are 100% reliant on the water authority. That affects their rates. Density is generally helpful. So if you're more dense, it's easier. So Fallbrook's about, a little over, one person per acre. City is about 6 times that. That means every individual owns a lot of infrastructure, right? So some people might live half a mile from their neighbor, you got a half a mile of pipeline. So that infrastructure, there's a cost to having that lifestyle. So those are, some big factors. The way the water authority's rates are set also impact different communities differently. So they have a rate structure. It isn't per unit of water you buy, but it has other factors based on where your water demands were. So Fallbrook, who's have dropped by more than 50%, we have this tailing cost we were paying to the water authority from past purchases. So our rates might actually end up being a little higher than others that are stable or growing. Also, if you have development, California is sort of this perpetual growth model where some of the costs today are borne by people that are, building. We don't have any, I might sell 7-8 meters a year. People think there's a lot of development in Fallbrook, but not in our service area. So you're not getting money to fund it. So it means everyone who lives there today is paying all those costs themselves. And so that's what drives rates, and Fallbrook sort of at the forefront because of all those factors. So what you're starting to see in Fallbrook, I think, is an issue, the city of San Diego now, where I think they're, $90 a month for kind of a standard bill, where we're up closer to 140, right? So where we are at, where they're going to be in 5-6 years with the trajectory we're on, that creates a lot of pressures in a local community.
So you mentioned the bill, right? I'm sure, I just paid my landlord.
Right.
I don't know how much I pay in water, but, you know, you open up your bill, $90 bill or $140 bill. But at the same time, we're hearing a lot that we're using less water as, individuals. We're mindful of the times that we water our lawns or, how long our showers are. Maybe we don't listen to Beyonce in the shower for too long. Why does that happen if you're not using as much water?
And I can explain, Nick and I think generally have the same thoughts on where things need to go. We just have different perspectives, probably because I'm in the weeds of it and Nick's dealing with homelessness and other stuff where I just do, water. So there is a conundrum there in that most of a fair portion of your costs are to maintain that infrastructure, right? So it's hard when we say use less water, but say Fallbrook Public Utility District, for example, I can't have less people, right? The system's the same system. I have to collect all the same samples. I got to do all that other stuff. And really, this isn't just a local issue. This is sort of a national issue, right? There's a lot of new regulations. We're detecting contaminants at lower levels. We're saying we want to treat those at lower levels. Our infrastructure is getting old. And so if a water district is going to do all this and be all those things to those people, then you've got these growing costs on less units of water. Because in California, we're saying we want people to use less water. That has an impact on price of water. It basically means you can use the same amount of water, but your rate's gone up, or you used 8% less, but then that puts pressure on the agency to say, well, I got to recover that cost now on less units of water. So you use less water and your bill went up, right? And so that is really, the challenge we're in is there's certain things we can adjust and there's certain things we can't. And I think that's one of the places, from a Fallbrook side where it may be different than other water authority member agencies, is saying with everything we have, we can't pay the premium we're paying at the water authority, right? The investments they made, that cost to us, we can't bear that with everything else that we need to bear, where that's different based on different communities.
And I would just say that I think one of the things that's sort of important is, and I want to give a primer to this as well, so the water authority is, also subject to the same inflationary costs as everybody else, right? So SDG&E utility rates, that if that goes up, that gets baked in at the water authority as well. Metropolitan water districts, as Jack mentioned, they assess rates and charges as well. So if they increase water rates, then that's going to get passed down to us. So there's kind of that's in there too. And then there's the sheer economics that we're talking about of water, the supply and demand, right? So, we are using less water, and, at the authority, it's true enough that, generations of water leaders have, made investments, water supply reliability investments to make sure that our region is able to provide our residents with, water in times of drought. California has seen some of the most severe droughts, and some of the most severe restrictions came down in about the 90s, which caused the water authority to start walking down this path of trying to make more local investments, or at least make sure that we're more insulated and rely less on imported water from metropolitan water districts, right? But getting to what Jack was talking about sort of the Venn diagram where, the city and Fallbrook have some agreement, which is with the question that I've been asking since I've been on the board, which was, do those agreements, those long-term commitments that we made, do they make sense today? And my belief is based on this concept that what has always been shouldn't dictate what we do now. Right? We have to be mindful of what the data is telling us in terms of consumption, what people are using in real time and year over year. And then we need to be able to have the flexibility to adjust accordingly. And I think one of the things that I've observed since I've been on the board, and I've shared this with the water authority staff, I've said it in board meetings too, is a lack of a willingness to get creative, to think outside of the box, and maybe have some of these difficult and hard conversations to revisit some of the commitments that we've made. Because if we continue to procure water at the levels that we are and it's just being stored, then that's nice to have on a rainy day. But then at a certain point, you get to a place to where you're not selling enough, and then you have a gap that you're going to then have to increase water rates. And so I think it's essential that the authority and the board really take a hard look at some of these commitments. And I will say that we are starting to do that work now. We have leadership at the authority that has has heard the message and they are agreeing with it, and they are looking to do that work now. But I just believe that it's been long overdue, and it's why we're in this place that we are. But yeah, I am hopeful in that sense that I think there will be some real opportunities for the authority to be able to do some of that stuff to then address rates.
Yeah, and you know, an entity like the Water Authority, where you've got a 36-member board and 24-member agencies, you're a bit of an oil tanker, right? And so it doesn't turn that quickly. You know, some of us, I think the frustration is we've been saying for a while, hey, we're headed towards an island. And for a long time, people would say there's no island there. And I think now we're saying there's an island, and we need to start to think about moving. There's still a group that's sort of convinced the island will move. And I think that really needs to get addressed is no, we're going to have to start to turn, you know, the difference in frustration I still have is as I'm at those meetings, I hear Nick and I go, those are good points, but it doesn't seem like we've yet started to turn. The Water Authority has yet started to turn. And the problem is if you wait too late, then your turning has to be really evasive. And so I think getting that movement now is important. I think there's a group there that, you know, wants to do it, but the time's running out quicker than people realize. Is demands have dropped, you know, so we anticipated, the Water Authority anticipated to sell about twice as much water as we are today. So a lot of the past moves were based on a different future than where we're at today. Projections still say, well, we're going to, you know, don't worry, we're going to make up some ground in, you know, I think about 100,000 acre feet or so over the next, you know, 5-10 years. Again, putting that in perspective, I think this year they sold 350,000 acre feet. Don't worry about what an acre foot is, just to put it in relative context. You know, that's a significant growth in demand. I think there's a starting realization that price has an impact, right? So that recovery in demand sort of is ignoring the fact that once you take out a lawn, you know, and you start to save $300 a month in water for this lawn, you're probably not going to put it back in unless you win the lottery or something like that. There's a real cost. And when a lawn's $500 a month, then you're going to make this investment to take it out because it may not be worth $500 a month of enjoyment. So that future is one that we really need to, this region really needs to start planning for. We need to have a plan for a future in which demands do not recover. These projects that are going to increase supplies here, the City of San Diego projects, they're getting built, right? Their pure water project is phase one, at least, is on the way. There's another project in East County. There's a lot of investment in this region in water supplies, and that means there's more money that has to go to pay that. Unless there's an adjustment, it impacts everyone who's part of this regional entity. It just kind of moves money around. So there's going to have to be a big change in thinking, or else, you know, what the city's just had to do in the last 2 years, that's going to be the next 10 years. And you're going to see 10 years from now, your bill's going to be twice what it is today, unless there's a real serious commitment to taking a new look at how we do things.
And one of the things that I've been sharing with the authority is that, you know, I'm going to do a poll and I may do myself a disservice here. How many people knew what the San Diego County Water Authority was? Okay, shit.
There's a lot of water.
Yeah.
Landing here.
Oh, it was helpful just to know who's in the room, right? You know, I mean, a lot. So I'll just say, you know, when I talk to residents, a lot of people don't know that the Water Authority exists. And if you watch a Water Authority board meeting, there's not a ton of people coming there to public comment. And to Jack's point about, you know, with these local projects coming online, water rates increasing, what Andrea was sort of talking about, the sticker shock that people are getting at the bills, you know, I'm telling you, you know, we at the City of San Diego and at the other retail agencies, yes, we are the ones who provide you with the bill and we're the ones who get yelled at. But increasingly, if we get to this place, I think a lot more people are going to find out where the Water Authority is, and then the public is going to start demanding some changes, right? So to Jack's point, that's where we've been pushing, and I've been urging my colleagues on the board to start asking these questions and to be engaged, because I think for a long time, and certainly this is the way I feel is 2 years in, I don't know how engaged member agencies have truly been at the San Diego County Water Authority. And so I think we have more people who are engaged and part of the conversation. We've had turnover, and that's not a shade on, people who weren't there, who were there previously. But I do think that all of us are feeling these pressures, and you can certainly feel it as a board member in the room. And so I think that's going to be one of the real conducive parts to driving some of this change, because we're going to have to, because the public's going to demand it.
So I am loving how friendly this conversation is, but I do want to get into a bit of the Smackdown.
Okay.
So Jack, you guys got a lot of stuff going on. Fallbrook's trying to leave San Diego County.
What?
Messy breakup. Not.
So is the question why? Why? So yeah, so a lot of this predates when Nick's been on there too. So we've been at it for about 4 years now. And the reason's a little simple for us for Fallbrook Public Utility District is that our geographic location is such that we actually don't need any infrastructure from the Water Authority. So I get all my water off Metropolitan Water District pipelines directly, right? So today, 100% of my water is coming off the Metropolitan Water District pipelines. Because I'm a member of the San Diego County Water Authority, I'm part of their wholesale rate structure, and I pay fees for infrastructure that we don't use. Now, if we were still in a place where demand was picking up and my growers were saying, I need more water, we just can't get enough water. Well, then, this kind of insurance policy of being with the Water Authority and paying a premium might make sense, but that's not what's happening. So, if you've been through Fallbrook, you see a lot of dead trees, and you see a lot of people going out of business, and you see a lot of people that can't pay their water bills, and you see sort of the backbone industry in Fallbrook going away, which puts you on a different trajectory. So, part of it is just the dynamic when we sort of first raised these issues with the Water Authority, like, hey, this relationship isn't quite working for us anymore. We were original members. So in the 40s, we said, hey, let's be with the Water Authority. And the cost of water to get it from the Water Authority or Met wasn't that different, that there wasn't this big premium. But now that premium's $400 an acre foot versus what I could get it from Met, which I have to go through another wholesale agency, but I won't explain that. But essentially to kind of just get this water. And so that really drove the question of saying, well, there's a mechanism. And when we joined the Water Authority, it said, here's how you join. And if you want to leave, here's how you leave, right? You have, if you have property tax based fees, those property taxes continue to go to the Water Authority and your people get to vote, right? So we thought, all right, well, at least it makes sense. Let's ask our ratepayers what they think. Let's bring it to a vote and give them a choice. Part of what drove this too is I had a rate hearing like Nick did. It was about 7 years ago, maybe now, and it was first time I got put as acting GM. The old GM wisely in the middle of this decided he had enough of this. We were standing room only in Fallbrook. Right. And those weren't people telling us we're really excited about this rate increase. And really all we did is tell them what we had been doing. We said, hey, water costs are going to go up 8% a year for the next 5 years. That's what they'd been going up in the past, but we didn't really tell people. We just rate, we did a 1 year, you get a 218 notice, what it's called. It doesn't make any sense. No one can read it. But we said, well, we need to let people know what's coming and do this. And so we had people out in front of the grocery store with petitions. We got, I don't remember, close to 2,000 petitions, people signing. If you get too many of those, you can't raise rates and you're insolvent. So cost of water, while people in a lot of places, this is aggravating, it was a huge issue, in Fallbrook. And so that's really what drove us to saying we can't, business as usual isn't going to work. We have to do something, and so we met, with the Water Authority back then and said, hey, we're thinking about kind of exercising this right. Here's the differential. I went to my board, I tried to figure out ways kind of not to do it, honestly, at first, because this is going to be painful, right? This switching wholesale providers. But when you started to knock those things out, you said, well, it kind of makes sense for our community to do it. And back then the position was, we're going to fight you and we're not going to compromise anything. So that sort of embedded us in a trajectory to say, all right, well, we got to go down this road to which, there's a vote November 7th now of our ratepayers. And so, in some ways it's too bad because I think, there might have been a different, and who knows, the voters could vote one way or the other. They might say, we want to stay. We think it's worth the premium. It's sort of their choice. But I think there was a different trajectory at the beginning of it, but it's cost of water and sort of the differential impact that you're seeing in some rural communities versus, sort of the political inconvenience you're seeing in some other urban communities, the sort of lifeblood of Fallbrook's crumbling, and there's something we had to do about it.
What's your side on this?
Well, from the city's perspective, so I got, again, context, I got brought into this in May of 2021, right? So this was 3 years plus the conversations had already happened. Ball was rolling at LAFCO, so I just kind of got thrown into the middle of this for whatever reason.
You might explain I was going to say LAFCO.
Oh, sorry. Local Agency Formation Commission, they decide boundaries for water districts, governmental entities, and all that stuff. It's a super fun place. You all should check it out. So from the city's perspective, we just felt detachment was a distraction. It's not a real solution to the problems that we're facing as a region. And case in point for us is the fact that, about 70% of agriculture lies outside of Fallbrook and Rainbow. And so when they're saying that, they're doing this on behalf of their communities, we feel like, well, there's a larger conversation that we should be having then, because very cause that they're fighting for is going to inherently hurt the other agricultural communities in the region through increase in water rates and whatnot. So, when, again, I think we got to a place to, just the ball had already been rolling and each side was sort of stuck in their positions. And my role in leadership along with our new chair tried to get this to a place where we could maybe create some sort of settlement agreement, but we ended up just too far down the road. And so, the other point that I would make is that, again, at the Water Authority, I represent the city of San Diego, right? Our residents were going to be subject to what I think we now know is, if detachment occurs, a 5% water rate increase or whatever. What am I supposed to tell my residents at the city, right? I mean, that was sort of my perspective about what am I supposed to say when I have to, go to them and say, there's this rate increase that we're going to have to bake in because of this is what happened, right? So I think that was our perspective where the city ultimately opposed detachment. We don't think that it was fair for it to be harmful to our residents or the rest of the region. We felt like there was a better solution that could have been reached, not only for Fallbrook and Rainbow, but the other agricultural communities. And I think that was the discussion that needed to be had a long time ago. Unfortunately, things just got too far down the road with both entities kind of entrenched in their own positions. And so we are where we are.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is where I think things become a little bit of a challenge too, because Nick in his role is hearing certain information, and so for example, you heard it's a 5% immediate rate increase, and that's what Nick's being told, but it's not. So LAFCO studied it and said, all right, here's your relative rate impact, and they brought in a independent economist to look at the numbers, and they said, all right, here's your impact. It's the net impact ends up being about $12.5 million a year. To put it in context, I think we're projecting to buy about 3,000 acre feet or 4,000 acre feet next year. Like I said, we have our local supply project. That's like 1% of their demands, and so in our positions from the beginning. So just to be clear too, is in the beginning of this, we met with the city of San Diego and we said, hey, we're going down this road. Here's the solution. And it had to deal with the supply mix, right? So if we leave, you don't need this water for us. You're paying a premium for it. Start this conversation. Here's the solution, right? Because what we're doing, right, is saying, all right, we're going to go and buy our water from someone else. That has an economic impact on the Water Authority if they do nothing. But that same impact happens when the city of San Diego builds their pure water facility. So they're going to shift about half their demand off the Water Authority. Now they'll still be part of the Water Authority, and they're saying, hey, don't worry, we're not going to leave you with this whole thing. But looking at the politics already of the last rate increase of people saying, well, hey, what's going on? 20% over 2 years. It's going to be very hard for them to pick up that additional cost and not roll that cost off the water. It just, in my vision of the future, no matter how, good a job Nick does there, how strong a message he sends. I mean, even the last vote, there was a lot of councilmen that go, we're not buying this. Now, if they go there and go, hey, we're also going to pay a little more because we're trying to keep rates down for these other entities. So the pressure point really is left with the only place that can react is the San Diego County Water Authority looking at their supply mix, because otherwise we're just trying to move costs around to different entities. And the problem when you're a Fallbrook, where we're used to work, in this process, the city of San Diego didn't control it, right? Which they usually control processes. We're used to that. We don't control anything, right? And so we know whatever's going to come down in the future, we were going to be at the whims of, the city of San Diego, and that maybe isn't the best position for us to be in, given where everything's going now. There's discussions now, and I'm hopeful that with Nick and some of the new leadership, they're really going to focus in, and maybe that'll change. But the trajectory that things were on when we started, wasn't that. We weren't talking about offloading supplies. We were talking about building our own pipeline to the Colorado River. We were making more investments. So, there has been a transition, I think, at least from that of we're going to keep building to recognizing we've got to make some changes.
Yeah, and I think part of the, to the water rate increase specifically with regard to the LAFCO action and detachment, because of that uncertainty, that speaks exactly why the city continues to believe that this isn't the right solution to the problem. So the truth is that until detachment happens, you don't know how it's going to affect people's water rates. You don't know what the impact is going to be to the member agencies. You had a report that was done by LAFCO, right? That was commissioned by, an economist, and I appreciate that and all that being done. That's also, LAFCO is not the arbiter of the information that the Water Authority has, right? The Water Authority is the people who are going to have the impact. And so I think that was where, look, let's not put everybody in jeopardy of being like, well, we don't know what the number is. It could be $1, $2, could be $5, could be 18. We're not quite sure. This guy says this, Water Authority says this. All of that adds into this is not the right solution for a region. It's not a regional solution. And again, add in the fact that we have other ag communities that are going to need some kind of attention like this going forward. And I'm committed to doing that. With regard to Pure Water, I've been clear. Since day one that I got there, I've been asking, how is the authority going to plan for Pure Water? It's not in the cities of San Diego's interest to basically stick it to the rest of the ratepayers in the region, because again, that's not a regional solution either. And so I've asked the authority to continually put pen to paper to show us, how are you planning for this? Because now it's not just us at the city, it's Oceanside, it's East County. And so we have to plan for that future, and we need to have pen to paper to make that happen. And again, that's where I go back to where I began. Detachment is a distraction. It is a symptom of a much larger problem that we have in San Diego County. And so, with regard to whatever happens in at the end of the day with detachment, I think the authority has to take that as a very clear sign of what we need to look into, be mindful of, because again, we still have agricultural communities in the city and in San Diego County outside of Fallbrook and Rainbow, and they need our help. And so we should respond accordingly.
Yeah. And I think the thing we agree on is detachment was a distraction, right? I mean, in what I mean by that is it's not the most pressing issue facing the San Diego County Water Authority. The loss of Fallbrook Public Utility District and Rainbow Municipal Water District, our demands are headed in one direction, and they've been declining substantially. So this economic impact of like, well, it's going to recover. Well, it's just not, that's not the trajectory that you've got for those. So I think it's a distraction that it's preventing from dealing with really those bigger fundamental issues that the Water Authority is going to have to deal with. I tend to agree with that assessment. The other thing, though, I think when you talk about, there's a lot of ag outside of Fallbrook and Rainbow. The unique thing is that gets lost sometimes is Fallbrook and Rainbow is built around avocados for a reason, right? And avocados are water intensive. And a lot of the rest of the ag in San Diego County is not necessarily so water intensive. And people say, well, that's fine. Convert then, right? That's easy. Convert Fallbrook and Rainbow to something that's not avocados. But then those people haven't been to Fallbrook and Rainbow, because the reason it worked in Fallbrook and Rainbow is it's grown on steep, well-drained hillsides. You don't build a greenhouse on a steep, well-drained hillside. You don't grow a lot on a steep, well-drained hillside, but you can grow avocados. So the challenge, and you'll see it out there right now where people are going, man, property values, I can't afford property anyway. Well, that's not the case in a lot of Fallbrook, right? Because this property that had high value is avocado. Now people are going, well, what is the value of it? And so it's in a very different place where Fallbrook was in a position where we can't wait for the water authority to resolve these issues. We needed to take action sooner because this is an immediate problem. And 10 years from now, it's too late.
Gonna jump in with a quick audience question since we're going to wrap up soon. Should the water authority even be setting rates? Maybe we need the state to step in. What are your thoughts?
Don't get me started on the state.
I think it's I think there is I guess I'll take the question this way. There is a value to the region to have the San Diego County Water Authority in existence. And I think it would be, I don't think it's anything that necessarily requires state involvement. What I do think is it requires people who are at the table, who are willing to engage in the conversations that need to be had in a productive way. And that's what I've tried to bring to the authority, is a willingness to collaborate. Keep in mind, as a regional government body, is the whole notion of regionalism, right? You've heard it, 38-member board of directors, right? And while, I know there's some people who want to talk about the vote share that the city of San Diego has or what have you, the idea is just like every other regional body in this region, SANDAG, MTS, Airport Authority, just like all of those bodies, it is the notion that you're supposed to work together on these critical issues that benefit the entire region. And I think there has to be a willingness to engage in that in a more meaningful way, and a willingness to have the hard conversations that we do need to have. I'm game to do that. I know that there's a lot of people who are game to do that. Again, detachment is just a symptom of a much larger problem. But what we really need is collaboration amongst all of us, recognizing what it is that we're talking about. We're talking about water, probably the most precious resource that we have. And so it's not something that I think we can, always be entrenched in our own interests.
Yeah, and the thing I add to that is the state in a way is now involved, because the state basically formed these things called LAFCOs. And LAFCO is sort of the referee of special districts, right? So they're out there, and every 5 years they're supposed to do a review and basically say, are you operating in the best interest of the public, right? That's kind of their role. Are you being efficient? And they haven't done one yet for the water authority. And out of the detachment process, one of the things that LAFCO realizes, we need to take a look at this, right? There's a lot of issues there. Are they getting addressed? Are there issues that aren't getting addressed by the nature of a governing board and sort of the intertie of water and politics and all that are just too entrenched to get done with? So, the state in some ways will be kind of taking a look at the water authority as part of what's called a municipal spear review, which will probably highlight, hey, here's some issues that, need to get dealt with, and give some different perspectives. So, and, if it doesn't get fixed, then the state ends up, really getting involved. But setting water rates, I hope we don't end up in a position where the state tells us how to settle our water rates. I don't think that'll work well.
Well, if you got anything from this panel, go to the San Diego County Water Authority board meetings and LAFCO meetings. It sounds like fun.
Well, Jack and I are there, so there's that.
Thank you so much. And